The night was dark and
my
cold in the desert.
God.
Thomas Reed could not sleep. He lay in his small bed, staring at the ceiling of his ranch house. The wind moved outside, making soft sounds against the windows. Everything was quiet. Everything was normal. But something felt wrong. Thomas was 58 years old. He had lived alone on this ranch for 12 long years. His wife Martha had died, and after that, he had no family left. No children, no brothers or sisters. Just him and his animals. The ranch was small and far from town. The nearest neighbor lived 10 miles away. Thomas liked it that way. He did not want to be around people anymore. People asked too many questions. People reminded him of everything he had lost. He had 3 horses on his ranch. The youngest was a brown Marais named Copper. She was only 4 years old and still learning. The middle horse was a white gelding named Ghost. He was calm and gentle, but the oldest horse was special. His name was Thunder. Thunder was a big stallion. His coat was black, but gray patches covered his face and legs now. He was 15 years old. Thomas had bought Thunder as a young colt many years ago, back when Martha was still alive. They had raised the horse together. Martha used to feed Thunder apples from her hand. She would brush his mane and talk to him like he was family. When Martha got sick, Thunder would stand by the fence near the house, waiting for her to come outside. Even after she died, the horse would wait there sometimes, like he remembered. Thunder was not just a horse to Thomas. He was a memory. He was the last piece of the good days. When Thomas felt too sad or too lonely, he would go to the barn and sit with Thunder. The horse never judged him, never asked questions, just stood there, breathing slowly, being present. That was enough. Thomas finally closed his eyes around midnight. Sleep came slowly. His dreams were empty and dark. Then something woke him up. A sound. A loud sound that made his heart jump. Boom, boom, boom. Thomas sat up fast in bed. His hands shook. What was that? It sounded like someone hitting the barn with a hammer. But who would be out there at this hour? He looked at the old clock on his wall. 3 in the morning. Boom, boom, boom. The sound came again, louder this time. Thomas threw off his blanket and stood up. His bare feet touched the cold wooden floor. He grabbed his lantern from the table and lit it with trembling hands. The flame flickered. Yellow light filled the small room. He walked to the window and looked outside. The night was pitch black. No moon. No stars behind the clouds. Just darkness everywhere. But he could see the barn. And he could hear that sound coming from inside it. Boom, boom, boom. It was not stopping. Thomas pulled on his boots, not bothering to tie them. He threw a coat over his shoulders and grabbed the lantern. His heart beat fast in his chest. Something was very wrong. He could feel it in his bones. He ran outside. The cold air hit his face like ice water. The ground was frozen and hard under his feet. He ran toward the barn, the lantern swinging in his hand. The sound grew louder with each step. Boom, boom, boom. When Thomas reached the barn door, he stopped. His hand touched the wooden handle, but he was afraid to open it. What was making that sound? Was someone trying to break in? Was an animal trapped inside? He took a deep breath and pulled the door open. The sight inside made him freeze. Thunder was in his stall at the back of the barn, but he was not calm. He was not quiet. The big stallion was kicking the back wall with his hind legs. Hard, over and over again. His whole body shook with each kick. Foam dripped from his mouth. His eyes were huge and wild. "Thunder!" Thomas shouted. "Thunder, stop!" But the horse did not stop. He did not even look at Thomas. His eyes stayed fixed on the wall. He kicked again, and again, and again. The sound echoed through the barn like thunder in a storm. That was how the horse got his name years ago. Because when he ran, His hooves sounded like thunder. But this was different. This was not running. This was violence. Thomas ran to the stall. He held up the lantern to see better. Thunder's legs were bleeding. Dark red blood ran down from his hooves and pooled on the floor. The horse was hurting himself. But he would not stop. "Easy, boy, easy." Thomas reached out his hand, trying to calm the horse, but Thunder reared up on his back legs. His front hooves struck the air. Thomas had to jump back to avoid being hit. The horse screamed. It was a terrible sound. A sound of pain and fear and something else. Something Thomas had never heard before. Thunder came down and immediately started kicking the wall again. The wood cracked. Splinters flew through the air. The whole barn shook. Thomas stood there, helpless, watching his oldest friend destroy himself. Tears filled his eyes. "What's wrong?" Thomas whispered. "What are you trying to tell me?" Thunder kicked harder. The wall was breaking. But the horse did not care about his bleeding legs. He did not care about the pain. He only cared about that wall. Something about that wall was important. Something behind it was calling to the horse in a language Thomas could not understand. Thomas had worked with horses his entire life. He knew when a horse was scared of a snake. He knew when a horse sensed a storm coming. He knew the sounds they made when they were hungry or tired or sick. But this was different. Thunder was not acting scared. He was acting desperate. Like something behind that wall needed to be found. Like time was running out. The rancher looked at the wall Thunder was kicking. It was the back wall of the barn, the wall that faced the rocky hillside. Thomas had never paid attention to that wall before. There was nothing special about it, just old wood and darkness beyond. But Thunder knew something. The horse knew something Thomas did not, and he was willing to die trying to show him. Thomas stood in the cold barn, shaking, watching his best friend bleed. The lantern light made strange shadows on the walls, and the kicking continued. Boom, 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 like a heartbeat, like a countdown, like a warning that something terrible was about to be discovered.
Thomas did not know what to do. He stood in the barn watching Thunder kick the wall. Minutes passed, then an hour. The horse would not stop. His legs were shaking now. Blood covered his hooves, but still he kicked. "Please, boy, please stop," Thomas begged. His voice broke. He had never felt so helpless in his life. He tried to get closer to Thunder. He spoke in soft words. He made the calming sounds he always used with scare horses. But Thunder did not hear him. Or maybe he heard, but could not stop. The horse's eyes stayed locked on that back wall, like nothing else in the world mattered. Thomas left the barn and ran to the house. He grabbed a bucket and filled it with water. Maybe Thunder was thirsty. Maybe he needed to drink. Thomas ran back and put the bucket in the stall, but Thunder did not look at it. He just kept kicking. Thomas tried bringing food. He got the best hay. He even got an apple, Thunder's favorite treat. Martha used to give him apples every day. But when Thomas held it out, Thunder ignored it. The apple fell to the ground and rolled away into the shadows. "What do you want?" Thomas shouted. His voice echoed in the empty barn. "Tell me what you want." Thunder kicked harder, like he was answering, like he was saying, "Break the wall. Open it. See what I see." But Thomas was afraid. What if something dangerous was behind that wall? What if there was a wild animal trapped there? What if breaking the wall made things worse? He did not know what to do, so he just stood there and watched his horse suffer. The night seemed to last forever. Thomas sat on an old wooden box near Thunder's stall. His eyes were heavy. His body was tired, but he could not leave. If Thunder was going to kick all night, then Thomas would stay all night. That was what friends did. They stayed. The sound of the kicking filled his head. Boom, boom, boom. It became like music, terrible music that would not end. Thomas closed his eyes and remembered the old days. He remembered buying Thunder as a young horse. The colt had been scared of everything, scared of loud sounds, scared of shadows. But Thomas and Martha had worked with him every day. They taught him to trust. They taught him to be brave. And Thunder had learned. He became the strongest horse on the ranch. He could pull heavy loads. He could run for hours without getting tired. He saved Thomas's life once during a bad storm. Thomas had fallen in the mud and could not get up. Thunder had come back for him. The horse stood in the freezing rain and let Thomas grab his mane and pull himself up. Then Thunder carried him home. That was the kind of horse Thunder was. Loyal, strong, smart. If Thunder was kicking this wall, there had to be a reason. A good reason. The sun started to rise. Orange light came through the cracks in the barn walls. Thomas had been awake all night. His eyes burned. His head hurt. But Thunder was still kicking. The horse's legs were moving slower now. He was getting weaker, but he would not give up. Thomas stood up. He walked closer to the stall. He looked at the wall Thunder was kicking. It was damaged badly now. Deep holes showed where the horse's hooves had hit. Some boards were cracked, almost in half. The wall was old. It had been built a long time ago, before Thomas bought this ranch. The man who owned the ranch before Thomas was named John Carson. He had lived here alone for many years. Nobody in town knew much about him. He kept to himself, never talked to anyone. When he died, the ranch was sold cheap. Thomas bought it because he needed a place to start over after Martha died. He never asked questions about Carson, never wondered about the man's life. But now Thomas wondered, why did Carson build this wall so thick? Most barn walls were thin, just enough would keep the wind out. But this wall was different. It was heavy, strong, like it was built to hide something, to keep something locked away forever. Thomas pressed his hand against the wood. It felt cold. He put his ear against it and listened. He heard nothing, just silence. But Thunder heard something, or felt something. The horse knew something was there. I don't understand, Thomas whispered to Thunder. Help me understand. Thunder stopped kicking for a moment. He turned his big head and looked at Thomas. Their eyes met. In that look, Thomas saw everything. He saw pain. He saw desperation. He saw pleading. The horse was begging him to listen, begging him to trust. Thomas felt tears run down his face. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, boy, I hear you. I'll do it. He left the barn and walked to his tool shed. His hands shook as he opened the door. Inside were all his tools. Hammers, saws, a crowbar, a heavy axe. He had not used most of these tools in years, but today he would need them. Thomas picked up the crowbar. It was cold and heavy in his hands. He also took a hammer and some other tools. He put them in an old bag and carried them back to the barn. Thunder saw him coming. The horse stopped kicking immediately. He stood very still, watching Thomas. His bloody legs trembled. Foam still dripped from his mouth. But his eyes were clear now, focused, like he knew what was about to happen. I hope you're right about this, Thomas said to the horse. I hope there's a good reason for all this. He walked to the back wall. Up close, he could see how much damage Thunder had done. The wall was ready to break. Just a few good hits would bring it down. Thomas raised the crowbar. His heart pounded in his chest. What would he find? What had been hidden behind this wall for so many years? Thunder made a soft sound. Not angry anymore. Not desperate. Just waiting. The horse was finally calm because Thomas was finally listening. Thomas took a deep breath. He wedged the crowbar between two boards and pulled hard. The wood groaned. He pulled again. Something cracked. A board came loose and fell to the ground. Cold air rushed out from the gap. It smelled old, like dust and earth and time. Thomas worked faster now. He pulled more boards away. The hole in the wall grew bigger. Behind it was darkness. Complete darkness. He grabbed his lantern and held it up to see inside. What is this? He whispered. There was a space behind the wall. A small room carved into the hillside. Thomas could not see much yet. Just shadows and dirt. But something was in there. Something small. Something that had been waiting in the dark for a very, very long time. Thunder moved closer to the broken wall. The horse stretched his neck forward, looking into the darkness. He was quiet now. Still, like his work was done. Like he had finally made Thomas understand. Thomas's hands shook as he pulled away more boards. The opening was big enough now. Big enough for him to step through. He raised the lantern higher. The light pushed into the darkness. And then Thomas saw it. His scream filled the barn and echoed out into the morning. Thomas fell backward. The lantern almost dropped from his hand. His legs would not work right. His whole body shook. He could not breathe, could not think, could not understand what his eyes were seeing. There was a skeleton in the hidden room. Small bones, A child's bones, lying in the corner of the dark space like a forgotten toy. The bones were old, very old, covered in dust and dirt. But Thomas could see them clearly in the lantern light. A small skull, tiny ribs, little arms and legs all curled up. "No," Thomas whispered. "No, no, no." He covered his mouth with his hand. He felt sick. His stomach turned. This was not possible. How could there be a child's body hidden behind his barn wall? Who would do such a thing? And why? Thomas sat on the ground, breathing hard. His mind raced with terrible thoughts. Someone had put that child there. Someone had built a wall to hide the body. Someone had kept this secret for years and years. And now Thomas had found it. Now he knew. Behind him, thunder made a soft sound. Not a scream, not a kick, just a quiet breath. Like a sigh, like relief. Thomas turned to look at the horse. Thunder was standing still now. His head was low. His eyes were tired. The violence was gone. The desperation was gone. He had done what he needed to do. He had made Thomas open the wall. "You knew," Thomas said to the horse. His voice was shaking. "You knew someone was in there." Thunder blinked slowly. His ears moved forward. He took one step closer to the broken wall and looked inside. The horse stared at the small skeleton for a long moment. Then he lowered his head even more, like he was showing respect, like he was saying a prayer. Thomas did not understand how this was possible. Thunder had never been in this barn when the body was put there. That must have happened many years ago, maybe 20 years, maybe 30. Thunder was only 15 years old. He was not even born when this child died. So how did he know? How could he sense something that happened before he existed? But horses knew things. Thomas had seen it many times in his life. Horses could feel storms coming before humans saw clouds. Horses could sense when a person was sick or sad. Horses knew when danger was near. They had instincts that went beyond normal understanding. Maybe Thunder felt something in this barn. Something wrong. Something that needed to be found. Thomas forced himself to stand up. His legs were weak. He picked up the lantern and stepped through the broken wall into the hidden room. It was small, maybe 6 feet wide and 6 feet deep. The walls were made of dirt and rock. The ceiling was low. Thomas had to bend down to fit inside. He held the lantern close to the skeleton. His hand shook so badly the light moved everywhere. He did not want to look, but he had to. Someone needed to know what happened here. Someone needed to tell this child's story. The skeleton wore the remains of old clothing. A dress maybe, or a shirt and pants. It was hard to tell. The fabric had rotted away to almost nothing. Just brown pieces that fell apart if you touched them. But Thomas could see something else near the body. A small metal box. And a book. Thomas reached out slowly. He picked up the metal box. It was rusty and old. The lid was stuck shut. He worked at it carefully until it popped open. Inside was a piece of moldy bread, a small coin, and a tiny wooden horse carved from wood. A toy. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. This was a child who had toys. A child who carried lunch. A child who was real. Who had lived and played and then died alone in this dark place. He set the box down and picked up the book. It was small, made of leather that had turned hard and cracked with age. Thomas opened it carefully. The pages were brown and brittle, but he could see writing inside. Small letters written in pencil. The writing of a child. Thomas held the lantern closer and read the first page. "My name is Sarah Carson. I am 10 years old." Thomas stopped breathing. Carson, the same last name as the man who used to own this ranch. John Carson. This was his child, his daughter. He had hidden his own daughter behind this wall. Thomas read more. His hand shook so hard he could barely hold the book. "I'm sick, very sick. Papa says I cannot go to the doctor. We have no money. The winter is too cold to travel to town. I am getting worse every day. I am scared." The next pages told the story. Sarah had gotten sick during a bad winter. She had a fever that would not go away. She coughed all the time. Her father could not help her. He watched her get worse and worse. She stayed in the barn because the house was too cold. She wrote in her diary every day, even when she could barely hold the pencil. "Papa is crying. I have never seen him cry before. He says I will get better. But I know the truth. I can feel it. I am dying." Thomas read through tears. The words became harder to see, not just because he was crying, but because Sarah's handwriting got messy, weaker. She was running out of strength. It is hard to write now. My hands shake. I'm so cold, so tired. Papa sits with me, but he looks so sad. I want to tell him it is not his fault, but I cannot talk anymore. I can only write. The last entry was at the bottom of a page. The letters were shaky and barely readable. I'm scared of the dark. Please do not leave me alone. Please remember me. Please do not forget I was here. After that, the pages were blank. Sarah had died, and her father had built a wall. He had sealed her body behind wood and kept it secret. Maybe he was too ashamed to tell anyone. Maybe he was afraid people would blame him. Maybe he just could not face the truth of what happened. John Carson had lived with that secret until he died. He never told anyone about Sarah, never gave her a proper grave, never let her rest in peace. She stayed hidden in the dark for decades, forgotten by everyone. Alone, Thomas closed the book. He could not read anymore. His heart hurt too much. He looked at the small skeleton again. This was Sarah, a little girl who got sick and died and then disappeared from the world. Nobody knew she was here. Nobody came looking for her. Until Thunder. Somehow, the horse had known. He had felt her presence. Or maybe he had felt the wrongness of it all. A child hidden in darkness. A secret that needed to be told. Thunder had fought for 24 hours to make Thomas understand. To make him open the wall. To give Sarah a chance to be found. Thomas stepped out of the hidden room. He looked at Thunder. The horse was lying down now in his stall. His bloody legs were stretched out. He was exhausted, but his eyes were peaceful. He had done something important, something that mattered. Thank you, Thomas said softly. Thank you for not giving up. Thunder closed his eyes. For the first time in a full day and night, the horse rested. His breathing became slow and steady. The barn was finally quiet. No more kicking, no more screaming, just peace. But Thomas's work was not done. He had to tell someone. He had to make sure Sarah got the burial she deserved. He had to make sure her story was known. She had asked not to be forgotten. And Thomas would make sure that promise was kept. Thomas could not stay in the barn anymore. He needed air. He needed to think. He walked outside into the morning light. The sun was up now. The sky was bright and clear. But Thomas felt dark inside. He sat on the ground near the barn door and put his head in his hands. A child had been hidden behind his barn wall for 30 years. Maybe more. A little girl named Sarah who died alone and scared. Her father had built a wall to hide her instead of giving her a proper burial. And Thunder had somehow known. The horse had felt something wrong and fought until Thomas found her. Thomas did not believe in ghosts. He was a simple rancher who believed in hard work and honest living. But now he wondered, was Sarah's spirit trapped here? Was that what Thunder felt? Did the horse hear her crying in the darkness? Did he sense her fear and loneliness? Thomas did not know. Maybe he would never know. But it did not matter now. What mattered was doing the right thing. Sarah deserved better than a hidden grave. She deserved to be remembered, to be honored, to finally rest in peace. Thomas stood up slowly. His whole body ached. He had not slept all night, but he could not rest yet. He walked to his house and picked up his old telephone. His hands shook as he dialed the number for the sheriff in town. The phone rang 3 times. Then a man's voice answered. Sheriff Morgan speaking. Sheriff, this is Thomas Reed. From the Reed Ranch out past Miller's Canyon, Thomas said. His voice sounded strange. Hello, Thomas? You okay? You sound terrible, the sheriff said. Thomas took a deep breath. I need you to come to my ranch. Right away. I found something. Something bad. What kind of something? A body. A child's body. Hidden behind my barn wall. There was silence on the phone. Then the sheriff spoke again, his voice serious now. Say that again. There's a skeleton. A little girl. She's been there for years. Maybe 30 years or more. Her name was Sarah Carson. John Carson's place? That's your ranch now, right? Yes, sir. I think she was his daughter. I found her diary. She got sick and died. And he hid her body instead of burying her. The sheriff was quiet for a moment. Thomas could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. I'll be there in 2 hours. Don't touch anything else. Don't let anyone else in that barn. You understand? Yes, sir. Thomas, how did you find her? Why were you breaking down walls? Thomas looked out his window at the barn. He could see Thunder stall from here. My horse told me, he said quietly. What? My horse Thunder. He kicked that wall all night. Wouldn't stop. I broke it open to see what he wanted. And I found her. The sheriff did not say anything for a long moment. Then he spoke slowly. "We'll talk about this when I get there. Just sit tight." The phone went dead. Thomas put it down and stared at the wall. A horse told him. That was the truth. But who would believe it? People would think he was crazy. They would make up other stories about how he found the body. But Thomas did not care what people thought. He knew the truth. He made coffee and tried to drink it, but his hands shook too much. The cup rattled against his teeth. He set it down and walked back to the barn. Thunder was still lying down. His eyes were closed. His breathing was steady. Thomas opened the stall door and sat down beside the horse. He reached out and touched Thunder's neck. The horse's coat was wet with sweat. His legs were covered in dry blood. "I called the sheriff," Thomas said softly. "They're coming. They'll take care of her. Give her a real burial. You did good, boy. You did real good." Thunder opened one eye and looked at Thomas. The horse made a small sound. Then he closed his eye again and rested. Thomas sat with Thunder for a long time. He thought about Sarah, about her last days in this barn, sick and scared, about her father watching her die and not being able to save her, about the terrible decision John Carson made to hide her body instead of facing the truth. People did strange things when they were scared or ashamed. John Carson must have been both. Losing his daughter broke him, and instead of asking for help, instead of telling the truth, he built a wall. He created a secret that ate at him for the rest of his life. He died alone in town years later. Nobody knew about Sarah. Nobody knew what he carried inside his heart. Thomas wondered if John Carson ever regretted it, if he ever wanted to tell someone, if he ever came to this barn and stood by the wall and wished he could take it all back. Probably he did. Probably every day of his life. But shame is a powerful thing. It can make people do terrible things. It can make them hide the truth, even when hiding hurts more than telling. 2 hours later, Thomas heard trucks coming up the road. He stood up and walked outside. The sheriff's car came first, then another car behind it, and a third vehicle that looked like it was from the county. Sheriff Morgan got out. He was a big man with gray hair and a serious face. He walked over to Thomas. "Show me," he said simply. Thomas led them to the barn. He pointed at the broken wall. "She's in there, in a hidden room behind the wall." The sheriff walked over and looked inside. He stood there for a long time, not saying anything. The other men with him looked too. One of them took off his hat. Another made the sign of the cross. "Jesus," the sheriff whispered. "It's true. Her diary is in there too," Thomas said. "It tells the whole story. Her name was Sarah Carson. She was 10 years old. She got sick during winter. Her father couldn't get her to a doctor. She died here in the barn, and he hid her body." The sheriff turned to look at Thomas. "And your horse found her?" Thomas nodded. He kicked that wall for 24 hours straight. Wouldn't stop. Hurt himself bad doing it. He knew something was wrong. He knew she was there. One of the other men laughed. Not a happy laugh. A nervous laugh. "That's impossible. Horses can't know things like that." Thomas looked at the man. "You tell Thunder that. He's the one who saved her from being forgotten forever." The sheriff held up his hand. "Nobody knows how things like this work. Animals sense things we don't understand. I've seen stranger things in my life. What matters now is we found her. We can give her a proper burial. We can tell her story." They spent hours in the barn. They took photographs. They wrote notes. They carefully removed Sarah's skeleton and put it in a special box. They took her diary and her small belongings. The whole time, Thunder lay in his stall and watched. The horse did not move, did not make a sound, just watched them take Sarah away. When they were done, the sheriff came over to Thomas. "This is going to be big news. Reporters will come. People will ask questions. Are you ready for that?" Thomas shrugged. "I don't care about reporters. I care about doing right by that little girl." The sheriff nodded. "We'll give her a good burial, with a real grave and a headstone. The county will pay for it. It's the least we can do." "I want to be there," Thomas said. "When you bury her. I want to say goodbye." "Of course." After they left, Thomas went back to Thunder. The horse was standing now. Thomas got water and carefully cleaned the blood from Thunder's legs. He put medicine on the cuts. He brought fresh hay and food. Thunder ate slowly, like he was tired but finally at peace. "You're a hero," Thomas told the horse. "You saved her. You made sure she wasn't forgotten." 3 days later, they buried Sarah Carson on the hill behind Thomas's ranch. The morning was cool and bright. The sky was clear blue with no clouds. A soft wind moved through the grass. Many people came from town. The sheriff was there. The preacher from the church came. Some old people who remembered John Carson came too. They wanted to pay their respects to the little girl who had been forgotten for so long. Reporters came with cameras and notebooks. They wanted to write about the horse who found a hidden grave. Thomas stood near the grave wearing his best clothes. They were old and worn, but clean. Thunder stood beside him. The horse's legs were bandaged. He walked slowly, still healing from the injuries he gave himself. But he wanted to be there. Thomas could tell. So he brought him. The grave was on top of the hill where you could see the whole valley. Wildflowers grew there in the spring. Thomas thought Sarah would like it. It was peaceful, full of light. Nothing like the dark place where she had been trapped for 30 years. They had made a simple wooden cross for her grave. It was painted white. The words on it said, Sarah Carson. Born 1895. Died 1905. Finally home. The preacher spoke about forgiveness and peace. He talked about how God sees all things, even things hidden in darkness. He said Sarah was in heaven now, free from pain and fear. He said she was no longer alone. Thomas did not know if he believed all that, but he hoped it was true. He hoped Sarah's spirit was somewhere better, somewhere warm and bright, somewhere she could run and play and be a child again. When the preacher finished, people took turns putting flowers on the grave. Thomas had picked some wildflowers that morning. They were simple and small, but they were the best he could find. He placed them gently on the ground near the cross. Then he did something he had planned. He took out the small wooden horse from Sarah's lunchbox, the toy she had carried with her. He knelt down and pressed it into the soft dirt near the flowers. For you, he whispered, so you have something to remember the horse who found you. Thunder lowered his head near the grave. The big stallion stood very still. His eyes were soft. He breathed slowly, like he was saying his own goodbye. Some of the people watching started to cry. Even the reporters who had come to write a story seemed moved. After the burial, people came up to Thomas. They shook his hand. They thanked him for finding Sarah. They said he did a good thing. But Thomas did not feel like a hero. Thunder was the hero. The horse did all the work. Thomas just listened. One old woman came up to him. She was maybe 80 years old with white hair and tired eyes. I knew John Carson, she said quietly. I lived near him years ago. He was always so sad, so alone. Now I understand why. He was carrying this terrible secret. Did he have any other family? Thomas asked. She shook her head. Just Sarah. His wife died when Sarah was born. It was just the two of them. He must have loved her very much. That's probably why he couldn't bear to tell anyone when she died. The shame of not saving her broke him. Thomas nodded. He understood that kind of pain. When Martha died, he wanted to hide too. He wanted to run away from everyone who knew them. Grief made people do strange things. John Carson's grief had made him build a wall. Thomas's grief had made him live alone for 12 years. The days after the burial were strange. Newspapers wrote stories about Thunder. They called him the miracle horse and the horse who sees ghosts. People drove out to Thomas's ranch just to see Thunder. They wanted to take pictures. They wanted to touch him, like he was magic. Thomas did not like all the attention. Neither did Thunder. So Thomas put up a sign at the end of his driveway. It said, "Private property. Horse needs rest. No visitors." Most people respected it. The reporters eventually went away. The story became old news. Life slowly returned to normal. But Thomas was different now. He understood things he had not understood before. He learned that animals knew more than people gave them credit for. He learned that loyalty was the most important thing in the world. He learned that even small voices deserved to be heard, even if they came from someone who had been gone for 30 years. Thunder healed slowly. His legs got better. The cuts closed. New hair grew over the scars. Within a month, he was walking normally again. Within 2 months, he was running in the pasture like nothing had happened. But something had changed in Thunder too. The horse was calmer now, more peaceful, like he had finished something important and could finally rest. He still followed Thomas around, still came when Thomas called. But there was a new quietness to him, a wisdom. Thomas visited Sarah's grave every week. He brought flowers when he could find them. He pulled weeds. He made sure the cross stayed straight and clean. Sometimes he talked to her, told her about the ranch, about thunder, about the weather, simple things. He wanted her to know someone remembered her, someone cared. One evening, Thomas sat on his porch watching the sunset. Thunder was in the pasture, eating grass. The sky turned orange and pink and purple. It was beautiful, peaceful. Thomas thought about that terrible night when Thunder started kicking the wall. How scared he had been. How confused. He had wanted Thunder to stop, but the horse refused. Thunder knew something Thomas did not know, and Thunder fought until Thomas listened. That was the lesson Thomas realized. Sometimes you have to trust the ones you love, even when you don't understand. Sometimes you have to listen to the warnings that don't make sense. Sometimes the quiet ones have the most important things to say. Years passed. Thomas grew older. Thunder grew older too. People in town still told the story of the horse who found Sarah Carson. New people moved in who had never heard it before, and the old people told them. The story became legend. The kind of story parents told their children. The kind of story that taught lessons about loyalty and courage. When Thunder finally died at the age of 25, Thomas buried him on the same hill where Sarah rested. He put Thunder's grave right next to hers. He thought they should be together, the horse and the little girl he saved. Two souls connected by one impossible night. Thomas lived another 10 years after that. When he died, his will said he wanted to be buried on that hill too. So they buried him there, next to Thunder and Sarah. 3 graves on top of the hill. 3 people whose lives touched in a way nobody could have predicted. The ranch was sold to a new family. They kept the graves clean. They told visitors the story. And on quiet nights, when the wind blew across the desert, some people said they could hear things. The sound of a horse running, the laugh of a child playing, the voice of an old man talking softly. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe it was imagination. Or maybe some bonds really do last forever. Maybe loyalty really does change destiny. Maybe silence really does speak louder than words. The wooden cross still stands today, weathered by time, but still readable. And next to it, Thunder's grave with a simple stone marker. And next to that, Thomas Reed's grave. 3 lives, 1 story, 1 lesson that would never be forgotten. Because in the end, that night taught everyone something important. It taught them to listen, to trust, to never give up on finding the truth. It taught them that even the smallest voice deserves to be heard, that even the most forgotten soul deserves to be remembered. And it taught them that horses matter, that loyalty is everything, that even in the darkest moment, there is always hope, always light, always someone willing to fight for what's right. Thunder kicked that wall because Sarah needed to be found. Thomas broke down that wall because Thunder needed to be heard. And Sarah finally found peace because 2 loyal souls refused to let her stay forgotten. That is what love looks like. That is what courage looks like. That is what it means to never give up. And that is why, even today, people tell the story of the horse who wouldn't stop kicking, the rancher who finally listened, and the little girl who just wanted someone to know she was there. The end.